mothers was old-fashioned, outdated. They believed it excluded those women who could not have children and those who chose not to have children, as well as those whose lifestyle preempted the possibility of being parents. The board said further that the holiday was also an offense to those mothers who had been abusing, uncaring, selfish, and some who had deserted their children. They added a word or two more that some people's mothers spent their whole lives trying to make their children feel guilty for leaving the nest and forsaking them. They finally complained that the holiday was too tender and emotional for those mothers who had lost children. We here at Zion had a mother who would not come on Mother's Day because it was too painful for her. I never did hear how that turned out there. Now obviously I would not concur with the action of that school board because I had a loving, hard-working mother and a wonderful mother to our children. But as a pastor, I do face each Mother's Day from this pulpit knowing that the celebration of this holiday is not as simple as it appears to those who sell cards and flowers and candy. Whatever else our differences, all of us had or have a mother. Now, knowing that what I felt in many previous years of preaching about the emotional impact of Mother's Day, still I come back again with a Mother's Day sermon in the title, knowing it will exclude some of the people sitting in our pew. But I've narrowed that topic down to communication. How we communicate with our spouse. Communication is one of the top 4 reasons that couples come into marriage counseling. And generally, the wife is speaking from her heart, and the husband is speaking from his head. But they're on different levels. A fellow minister shared with me a time when he was talking with his mother a number of years before his father died. He asked his mom, "How's it going, Mom?" His mother said this, "I'm okay, but I'm lonely. Your father doesn't talk to me much anymore." That fellow minister, his dad, myself, and many of us men need to learn better how to communicate to our spouse. For I've heard it many times. The woman will sit there and say, "Well, he's always so busy. He's either at work, or he goes out and he plays golf, he comes home, he sleeps, he goes to bed." He will say, "It's not a big deal. I just can't talk to her." If it is true that many husbands do not know how to talk to their wives, then we should be asking why. Why is that the case? Why doesn't he talk and share his feelings? I think one of the reasons is that men in my generation, at least, and my father's generation, were not trained to talk. We were trained to work, to excel, to be tough, to be smart, to go out and change things in our world. We were trained to be the protector. We were trained that our job was to make a living, bring home the bread and the bacon, keep the wolf away from the door, and use the skills of manipulating things so that they could work to the advantage of our family. Not all of us were trained like that, but a lot of us were. I would imagine with successful people, it's even worse. Successful people cannot always use the skills they use out in the world back in their home. Frank Harrington told this story about how his wife reminded him one day to take out the trash. He said to her, "Honey, don't you know who I am? I'm the pastor of the largest Presbyterian church in the country." And And she said, well, you may be that down there at the church, but here you're my trash man. I think a second reason husbands do not talk to their wives is because of fear. Fear. One philosopher once said, God looks with eyes that see everything, and no one wants to be known that much. I think there's truth to that. Most wives see their husbands in their shortcomings and in their faults. It probably happens early in the marriage. The husband tries to share, but then he starts to feel something called shame. Shame. Because most of us don't want our weaknesses, our failures to be known by others. Somewhere we learn to believe that we will be rejected. We will not be liked as much if other people know how I truly am. But I believe wives have seen husbands when they've been acting like a child or being foolish and being petty when we're dominated by selfishness. Wives listen to our exaggerated mannerisms and styles, and no one else, at least almost no one else, except for that guy's mother, see the things that are in your husband. And so he's afraid. Afraid to share. Afraid to be honest because of shame and the power of shame in his life. Shame is a powerful force. But there's a true shame and there's a false shame. We need to ask ourselves, when we feel that shame, is it a true shame? Or is it something that I've made up that's not true? And I believe, ladies, women need to be careful at that point. For example, I read about a minister who preached a sermon that he thought was quite good. His wife told this story 5 years after that. She said, he came to me that day, he preached that sermon and asked, how was my sermon today, honey? And she said, I told him. She was kind, but not everything she said was positive. And you know, she said, he has never asked me again. Not once. That sounded to me like that husband needed his ego built up and couldn't handle the truth. What do you do, my friend, when your spouse can't handle the truth? How do you relate? How do you talk? I believe you have to be honest, because you cannot have intimacy without honesty. Now, having acknowledged that spouses ought to share themselves and having touched on the hidden fear, there's one more thing we need to share with you. How we talk to our spouse. Speak kindly to her. She's a difficult job to do, whether she's tied up with children or grandchildren, or housework, or her own career, or worrying and running after you, or helping you with retirement, or helping you with the problems of growing older. Whatever it is, it's not easy to be a wife and a mother, and it's not getting easier for the next generation. I believe it's getting harder for women to thrive and blossom and learn to grow and relax. As we saw last week in Ephesians, husbands are commanded to love their wives as Christ loved the church. Love. What did we hear in the scripture? It is the most excellent way. And the context for 1 Corinthians 13, Paul has been addressing the issues in the church and the spiritual gifts that God has given to all of us. That our church, any church, is the healthiest when all the people are exercising those spiritual gifts. But then Paul states that you can have the best gift ever, the most amazing gift, like speaking in the language of angels or having faith to move mountains. or giving away everything you have to the poor. Wonderful ways of serving God, but if you don't have love, you have nothing. The Apostle Paul chooses the Greek word agape to describe the love we are to have. It is more than a romantic sexual love of eros, although that love is given to us by God. It is more than the friendship bond of phileo or the parental bond of storge, although both of those come from God. Agape love is a sacrificial love, which seeks to do the best for the other. Agape love is a giving love. An anonymous writer sought to describe this kind of love with a poem that is titled, "What is the love of God?" The love of God is like a mother's calming words, a father's strong embrace, a friend's laughing countenance, telling my soul, I'm not alone. Others walk with me. This is love in action. Love that puts the other person, their needs first. Love that serves. Love that builds lives, doesn't tear down lives. Gentlemen, our love for our spouses to be like Christ's love for the church. That may feel impossible to love like that. Why, yes, it is. Without the help of God. Without God's love in us, we cannot love our spouse that way. But when we allow God to be at work in us, we will speak words motivated by love. We will do deeds motivated by love. Amen.